everybody here for GRIP-Birkman Coaches Cafe today, and joining the I to We community as we are talking about some of the hints that we might give for some practical things you can do as you're leading teams to learn how to build unity that results in kingdom growth. It's not just unity for unity's sake, but unity that ultimately produces fruit for the kingdom. And you had an article that you could be reading there on the itowe.org website. John Blake, Matt Blake, our brother team are going to be sharing some of those things together. So John, why don't you take the lead and let's get started.
Yeah, sounds good. I was just, as we were talking about this unique season, there's so much lead up to Easter, so much lead up in the church and so much work that goes into it, and so many added volunteers, so many hours that are invested into it. I just a lot of times in that post of something that's such a high, we're fatigued, we're tired, and yet it's a great opportunity because we've seen so many people get to participate that it just gives us some unique opportunities to both affirm them, look then at how we might continue to include them in things as we move forward, as well as then looking at how we recharge. And so those three ideas of how do we really affirm in a meaningful way coming out of everything, the idea then of how do we leverage this time to make sure that we're capitalizing on the team, on those dynamics, as well as then making sure that we're not continuing a trajectory to burnout, but rather being intentional toward a refreshing, a renewing. What do those habits look like? So just wanted to dig into each of those and just think practically how we do them. So Matt, you get to lead an international church, and you have a lot of people. I know you had some unique opportunities. When you think about that idea of affirming someone on who they are, what are some of the things that you've tried, or what are some of the ideas that rang true for you from the little post?
Yeah, and I appreciate the thoughtfulness on the post, understanding the dynamics coming out of this, because I think it is easy after such a push that we desire in some ways to kind of check out in leadership. Other people probably do too. They probably want to take a break, but it isn't a key opportunity to give some positive affirmation, which just is the time to recognize what people have done. So we've done that in some different ways, and we have a lot of, like probably most churches or organizations, a lot of people involved in different things. And some of it is helping them pull away actually for the rest. So it's gathering those together. So on Monday, which provide in our country, that's still a holiday, so we get that bonus right there. But we went for a walk together with some of our key leaders and had a grill, and it was a really low key day, really relaxing. No agenda, I mean, we celebrated just as Christians together would, but really low key. But in some ways, it was that chance to intentionally pull away, good for me and for us. And then you have a chance to just kind of say thanks. Because I think you're right. I think it's a great opportunity, and I liked all three of those points, but I think there's an order to them that's really key. There is the affirmation, there is the modeling the rest that we need. And then there's the opportunity to seize on the togetherness so that we're looking forward. But you do that in the wrong order, and the two will get lost, right? The affirmation and the rest will get lost because you jumped right into, man, look at what we can do with this now that we've got this momentum. And I think for some, right, that's not bad, but for a lot of people, when you need rest, the last thing you want to do is to think about the next book or training or activity you're going to do. So I appreciated all three parts, but I do think there's an order to it that's key for some, at least. in our groups.
And so with that rest and modeling that, you know, how have you found a balance, or what are some tips that you might say around a balance between withdrawing and modeling appropriate boundaries or rest? You know, how do you do that? Because, you know, when I get fatigued, I'm like, see ya. I'll be back in a couple weeks. And, you know, if I have a scheduled meeting with you, it'll start 5 minutes late, and I'll try to be present at least 45% of the time for you. So, you know, that balance of not withdrawing and yet modeling, you know, how do you do that well?
I think that's been a challenge for me, and I suppose that's different for people depending. The Birkman gives us some way of kind of visualizing that I'm deep down in the blue, and so when it's heavy, I just want to check out. In fact, I'm not even, on a positive day I'm looking to rest. On a bad day, I just don't even want to see anybody, and I don't have the energy to put into it. So even knowing that I ought to doesn't really help me overcome that. So I think there are times to be honest about that okay, I'm in that place. Maybe others are too, and to be able to do that, even out of maybe when we don't get it right, to be honest about those things. I've tried to do better in that, to say, hey, I'm not managing this well, and I'm not as engaged as I would like to be here, and I need some time because I haven't done it well in the past. So these past weeks, so I'm here. But I think also, giving people the chance to find their own ways. One of the things I liked about that you mentioned in the article is paying attention to people. Now, you were mentioning it in the ways that we affirm people, but I think also in the ways that people have their needs. There is, what do others need? Because and we all know this, right? It'd be so wrong to assume everyone needs the same thing I do, or is refreshed in the same way I am. And so being able to give people the space to explain why I'm I love people, but on Mondays I really don't want to see any of them. And my group has kind of gotten to know that. Like, they can call on me and that's okay and stuff, but they know that's my day to kind of pull away. And it's not because I don't like them. It's actually for my health, because I do care for them. But that took some like explaining. And then I think I'm not asking other people to do the same thing, but I am asking them, what is it for you, that helps you get in that, and give them a freedom in their own way, right? Their own, to understand that, whether they've done the assessment to see that visually, or they just kind of reflecting on their own self. Not all of our leadership team has done the GRIP-Birkman. So some of them, it's just asking them to reflect. And most people can get there if you give them some good questions, to help them think through, how do I do that, and how do you do that, and how can we honor each other, maybe, or encourage each other. I've got some friends who just encourage me. Hey, have you had that time? Hey, are you saving that day? Are you keeping it? And as we get to know each other, I think that's the building of the we, right? It's not the building of the assessment and my knowledge from the assessment, but it's really building the relationship with some, so that we can talk to each other that way. Are you doing those things? Are you giving yourself the time? Are you and your wife getting away? Or whatever it might be that's important?
Yeah, I think it's an important piece, right? Because we do have, in some cases, we have an assessment that gives us a bit of a cheat sheet on certain things, but it doesn't take away from the necessity of really having the relationship, so that we can do something with that information, right? Especially when we're talking about needs. If we try to overplay and, well, I know this is what you need, or this is what it says, and push too far on that side, then we'll actually cause a disconnect. I've seen this in organizations where we cause a disconnect from the entire assessment because we're abusing its use in some cases. We're overplaying its hand rather than letting the foundation be the foundation of relationship.
Yeah.
I want to go to the other side of that, though, because and for the group as a whole, this is part of what I think, even as as we deal in different venues, it's how do you keep track? You know, you've got 10, 12 people that are essentially sort of in a closer in circle. You probably know 3 or 4 of those well enough to where it's always top of mind. Hey, you know, my wife needs to verbally process. She's had a long day. She wants to talk it through. And I want to essentially say, well, we don't need to talk about that right now. Let's just wait another week to have that conversation. But I've learned that I need to honor that. I can't do that for a lot of people. I don't have a good enough memory. So outside of all the memory games that you can play to try to trick yourself into memorizing things, how do you remember that? Or do you even try to? Do you keep sort of some sort of cheat sheet on people that sort of reminds you, hey, this is how they would like to be affirmed, this is how they might recharge? Or is that simply something that you just sort of ask in the moment? How does that work?
I'd love to hear from some others on that. I'll mention mine, and then I'd love to hear from some others, because I think I don't do this well. I don't have a great memory. And so even as I was, again, reading through the article, I was like, man, it would be so good to just create a little one page, a little half page. You know, I've got 10 people on my ministry leadership team that's closest to me, right? I don't remember all of them. I could tell you two, I think, right? I could make an educated guess on a couple more, but to have that, because I don't do well at that. And I think I've gotten in trouble assuming that I read people well enough to just guess it. That just hasn't panned out for me. Again, I don't have a great memory, and I'm not a good guesser. So I don't. This is an area where I would love to hear how other people have kind of gained some tricks of the trade, so to speak, because I'd love to grow in that area. Anybody have some things that you've done that maybe have been key things?
Yeah, one of the things that we talk about in when we're doing like our coach training and when we're doing team builds, uh, we will often ask people to create their own profile, sometimes on a poster, sometimes on a sheet of paper. Sometimes they might even do it electronically, and then share it with their team members, share it particularly with the team leader or supervisor. But revisiting that often, how many times do we do that? And we've got the habit of having kind of that was a wonderful event, and then we put it back on the shelf and we forget about it. But revisiting that, I know some people that have kept their posters up in their offices for a while on their door, so when anybody comes into their office, they see it. Or for teams that are working virtually, to occasionally just come up and remind people, hey, I shared this with you electronically, get it out and let's look at it together. But continuing to revisit it with each other. But more importantly, with that, both of you have used two words that are so key to this. The danger we have in assuming that we know what that person's need is. Right now, my tank might be pretty full on one particular need. And so, please quit bringing me more chocolate cake. I've had enough chocolate cake so far. I don't need any more right now. I need something else. So be careful about assuming what that need is. And the way to avoid that assumption is to ask. We need to really be sure to just ask and not assume.
Mm-hmm.
I use my eyes. There are behaviors that change when their needs are being met. Like I've just watched this week, Monday, Tuesday, now we're into Wednesday. They come in with their head down. That's not their normal posture. They come in and close their office door. That's not their normal behavior. Their coffee mug is now a jug. There's certain things that you can notice. And so that's at least the flag that something has changed. They're not who they were Thursday, Friday, and Sunday. Sometimes, when I notice stuff like that at an appropriate time, a little bit later, I'll just stick my head and say, "Hey, how you doing?" Just kind of feel them out with a gentle nudge or a question. But I start with my eyes. But again, that assumes that we've been watching them and know how they are normally.
Yeah, I'm experimenting with something called a second brain right now, which is using electronic tools and so forth to keep track of things. And so far, I'm still in the process of building it. But with some of those that I work closely with, I have a place where I can pull up their profile and just kind of look at the last conversation we had. Which means also a practice of when I've had a conversation of importance that I make sure I write something down. And I think it's just in that practice, it's being able to even come back. And though I may not know their immediate need, I know where they were last time and I can see where they're at now by asking good questions.
That's really good, Jeff. I appreciate that. I'm terrible at that. I think sometimes I fool myself because I get done with the conversation and I think, wow, I would never forget that conversation. That was, what he shared with me or what she said. And then I come to the next one like 2, 3 weeks later, and you come back and you're like, oh my goodness, I remember it was really big, but what was it they said? And being able to just jot down something, having it handy, is not a bad plan there. Even if we think I would never forget that, our minds are a little more loose than we would hope sometimes.
And those where I have a GRIP-Birkman for them, I've added those details in there as well. I can look and see what their needs and stresses are, and also what their giftings are, and just kind of interact on those.
Yeah.
And that sort of takes us, segues a little bit into this idea of affirmation, right? Of how we can do that in a meaningful way. And this past year, I've probably spent more time in the R values assessment probably than I have on any of the others. And it's been interesting to understand the importance of being able to affirm someone for what they perceive as one of their high values, and the added impact, the added weight that carries. If I know that it's something that at a gut level, it's the way you think the world should be, and it's really important to you, so much so that with the assessment, you've listed it as one of your top 5. It's a different type of affirmation that we're able to do. I was just having a conversation yesterday with an individual that when you meet her eyes light up, she leans in, somebody that shows that she's very wholeheartedly in, but she had a low value of passion. And yet on the other side, she had this high value of integrity and collaboration. And it was just this interesting dynamic that I watched, in that, because my mind would have gone to, oh, I so appreciate your passion for the way you're doing things. But that would have actually, after a conversation with her, that would have almost been offensive to her, because she sees that as somewhat shallow at times, too much of a passion. Whereas for her, it was digging in deeply, and it was the integrity on how it was done, and it was the perseverance and the curiosity that were these high values. And just that shift from, as opposed to passion, the way that the curiosity leads you to lean in and challenge yourself and us to be more wholehearted in the way that we're approaching it. Those two affirmations, one would have been, I don't even know what you're talking about, or why would you say that about me? That's not what's true of me, to something that at a heart level would be so meaningful. It's just a highlight of how those values, that if we understand those about an individual, gives us a great platform for meaningful affirmation that's going to connect really really deeply with someone on how they view the world, on how they see things. So and there's different things. That's using values, understanding that about someone, and turning that into the example then of what we've seen, connecting the dots between those things. There's always just the affirmation for what people have done. That's always, valuable. But Matt, talk a little bit about when you think of meaningful affirmations, how do you go about doing that? Both connecting the dots, if you will, from, what's important to a person to what they've done, as well as then what mode, or do you find that do you default to sort of what you would appreciate? How do you stay connected on what would be valuable to that person? What does that look like?
Yeah, it's tough if you're doing a group, right? So if you're doing an individual and you know that, then I love that, and I love the paying attention and doing that and learning about them. I think it still takes some questions, to get to know. Even when I did a workshop using some values things just recently, and for instance, two of the people really valued freedom, but as we got to talk about it, why they valued freedom was coming from two different places. And that was interesting. They both had the high value of freedom, but one had lived through, I live in the Czech Republic, one had lived through communist era. And freedom for them took on this whole historical, I didn't have it all the time type of thing. Another person, it was much more the autonomy. I like their freedom to be able to do my own thing. Very different. So even knowing the values, I think we ask some good questions, hopefully, to get to know what would connect with them. But the group thing, I maybe not on the values so much, but on the four quadrants. One of the things, and I'll be honest, we stumbled into this, and I reflected on it later and thought, wow, thank you, Lord, because Lord helps us when we're stumbling along sometimes. And we were wanted to do an appreciation for our volunteers in our church, and there were about 75 that we had. Our church runs about 75, but we had about 75 volunteers for different things in our church, and we did a brunch that was a gift to them that morning that they could enjoy right then. And we had everyone write on a card to people. So everyone's writing on each other's cards to say, hey, why do I appreciate you? Something that they could read later, take home with them. Someone has given some thought to them. We in turn brought each group up, whether they're working with music or children or whatever they might have been doing, and honored them in front. And then we gave them a packet of seeds that they could go and plant, in illustrating that they could do something in the future. I hadn't thought about the four areas until later, but because I think when we're doing groups, our default is to choose one or maybe two. Maybe we honor them and give them some chocolates or something. But to be able to give a little bit more so that you're trying to hit all of those different ones a little bit, so that at least each person, maybe one part of that day was more meaningful than one of the others. But when you got a group, I think you want to be thoughtful. Okay, we have a variety of people here. Let's honor and appreciate and affirm in a variety of ways. It won't all be equally meaningful. Doesn't need to be. That's not the point. But because I recognize the variety, the diversity of our group, I want to somehow affirm in a diverse sort of way. When I'm doing an individual, I love what you've just said there, to look at what it is that they really find important and honor and affirm that in them. And when they bring that to the group, to be able to notice that again. But I think that's a combination, right? You want to notice what they value, but then you also want to bring it in a card or in a gift, or what is it that speaks to them well. Um, yeah, and again, that can feel overwhelming when you've got uh, just even 10 or 15 people that you want to affirm. Oh my goodness. So I think finding ways that that we're just beginning to learn and notice them without feeling the pressure. I think there's a lot of grace here too. When you're affirming someone, and certain times we're going to hit it right on the nail on the head, and other times it's going to be a heartfelt thing, and hopefully we begin to, again, in relationship, receive and give, because certainly some people are going to want to affirm and honor me in ways that are honestly not all that important to me, and yet it's a gift from them. So we're learning to receive and give in ways that are relational, even when maybe we miss it. Although I think we're always trying to do better, right? We're always trying to get a little better in those things.
It's good. I think the other side of that, as far as that reinforce it, affirmation is an opportunity to reinforce as well. And I think we just always have to remember that as a team leader. What are those things right now that we're trying to reinforce as our team culture? In our team culture, what's relevant to us in this season? Are there certain new behaviors or things that we're driving toward together that we want to make sure that we're highlighting in that? And hey, we really, I saw the way that you interacted with this team. Man, so appreciate the way that you lived into that interdependence that we've all committed to. So appreciated the way that you drew them in and asked them to help you. That actually not only showed that you were strong enough to ask somebody for help, but that's exactly what we're talking about as far as how do we help people understand that we need each other. You modeled it in a beautiful way. Thanks for doing that. And so leveraging that is another opportunity of the affirmations. And we've had so many examples, coming out of Easter where we've seen them more often doing so many things to really think about, okay, as we're going into this next season, or as a church, we're really trying to live into this. How do we do that meaningfully to really use that opportunity of reinforcement? I think that's important. And then the other piece that I would say from in regard to reinforcement, and we are all GRIP-Birkman coaches here, that it gives us a chance to reinforce the grip components as well. It gives us a chance to restate, whether it be the team style or the bodybuilding role, but allows us to affirm in those terms. And as we use those terms, hey, you're let me help you, shined in a way that was really impactful in the children's ministry this past week. Thank you so much for doing that. Or, man, the let's be careful of how you paid attention to the details on how we set that up really made a difference for me personally. And I saw these other people that really responded well to that. I saw you afterwards listening intently. Thanks for being an active listener in our group. That's not one of where I shine, and see that, to know that I need you, it just felt different that I got to observe that. Those types of things allow us to draw into, again, who God designed them to be, that unique DNA perspective on it. But it also allows us to reinforce that grip, as far as for us as a team, really gives us that body language, the body life language that we've been desiring. So don't miss that. Don't miss that in saying thank you. Think about, there's a thank you, there's an individual that I'm connecting it with, and there's a team that we're trying to work towards certain things. And when we can do those three elements in an affirmation, then we've really, I think we're really maximizing, sounds weird on an affirmation, but we're really doing a good job of thinking how we can connect those three elements in a meaningful way for the people.
And I think if I could throw it in here, John, I mean, we're talking really positive stuff, right? Affirming the positive. I think there's an aspect where we maybe been through some high stress times as well. The high activity, high pressure, high stress. There might be the need to come back and make some apologies too, or to mend some things that didn't go well. Where in the moment I didn't have time for you, and I said some things that didn't appreciate you, and I need to really come back and say, hey, I'm sorry. You were trying to bring who you were, and I didn't honor that. I didn't appreciate that. You were trying to let's keep us on track. You were trying to be the values keeper and being careful with those things. And I just wanted to do this, and I didn't honor that. I didn't appreciate that in the moment, and I'm sorry, because I really do want you to keep bringing that. I'm just recently had to make some apologies that I didn't respond well. I got a bit defensive, and I needed to come back and say, I'm sorry, because I don't want you to feel like you shouldn't come. I want you to keep coming with who you are. And I apologize that I didn't receive it well when you first came. And so sometimes after these times, hopefully there's a lot of affirmation, but maybe every once in a while we got to go back and do some apologies, or but I think we can do it in the same way, because we can still affirm someone else while we're apologizing for our lack of handling it well, maybe, or responding well in the moment. At least I know that's for me. I have caught myself more than once on that.
Yeah. I think on that note, it's interesting, the aspect of a cleanup conversation, for those of you that know Paul Ford well, he'll say, I make a lot of messes, but I clean up well, right? And that's true. If you know Paul, that's very accurate to who he is. But I was working with call them a dysfunctional team. I think that's fair, recently. And they were at about step 3 of their progress of trying to get back to having quality communication. And we got to this place. Initially, it was just ask for help, respond to help, make sure that you're responding to people. But we got to this point where they're in a high intensity environment. What we wanted to measure over the next time was not how many times they asked for help or even how many times they messed up and offended someone. It's how many of those cleanup conversations did they have? And that became then the measure that we were paying attention to, not as far as were we nice to everyone all the time, or did we just, sweep it under the rug and say it's nice, but it was the amount of cleanup conversations that they were willing to have with each other. So I just think I just love you highlighting that, because I do think the more intense the moment, the more that we're banking on the fact that we have trust and relationship credibility to be able to sort of push through in the moment. But if we don't have those cleanup conversations afterwards, we've depleted the bank, and we're going to be on thin ice for a little while with those individuals. But those cleanup conversations just have such an impact then, when we're able to do them well.
Guys, it sounds to me like what we're talking about here is really needing to develop our emotional intelligence in the context of body life, where I need to be self-aware and self-regulating. So I need to be able to identify what my own needs are and make sure that they're up to date, if you will, and being aware of my own strengths and my limitations, and having then some self-confidence that comes from that when I know myself well, but then also being able to recognize the needs of other people. And when there are mistakes, letting go of those mistakes, that's all part of emotional intelligence. And then learning to have some empathy and some concern for other people, that's emotional intelligence. Sharing my feelings with others, learning how to do that, and then taking responsibility for my mistakes. All of this is emotional intelligence that the world, the secular world, has developed. But guess what? It's based on Christian principles, biblical principles, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so much of it, we try, there are times where we try to overcomplicate it, but it's have the conversations,
Yeah.
be willing to recognize that we are flawed, that we're going to make mistakes, and keep leaning in, keep coming back, keep trying, and know that relationships are messy, right? That the I to we journey is a journey. It's not a destination. It's a process. And so with that, we have to continue to lean in and continue to offer grace and continue to ask for grace, as we're leading teams into this, which is then the opportunity for us to continue to say, okay, let's reflect, right, on what just happened. Let's reflect on the body life experience that we just had together. That gives us opportunity for that affirmation, gives us potentially opportunity for those cleanup conversations, but it also gives us a chance then to say, how are we doing? How are we doing as a team, and what does it look like for us to go. Now, that's not a Monday, Tuesday activity after Easter, but I would say probably within a couple of weeks that sort of that heartfelt reflection on how did it go? What did we learn about ourselves? What did we see in our team that was really healthy? Where did it create more opportunity? The idea of reflective learners, some of us default to that and we love to sort of reflect and spend lots of time, and there are others that are like, why would I look backwards when the windshield's a lot bigger than the rear view mirror? Why am I paying attention to the rear view mirror, right? I get all those things, but looking back though gives us some positive opportunities to really say, okay, where do we want to lean in this season? What would help us grow? What would help us move forward as we continue our journey of moving from I to we? And so I think that's sort of that third section, right? If we have done the rest, if we feel like we've recharged and we're modeling those things, we have some rhythms in place, or we know that that's an opportunity where we need to grow. We've taken a chance to affirm based on those giftings, based on the values in a variety of ways, then I think it's okay, what did we learn and where are we headed now moving forward? And I think, this is, again, a good opportunity because there is likely some positive momentum, some things that we really learned about each other, some ways that we saw the Holy Spirit move among us. And I would say, how do we capture some of that from a team engagement perspective in this season? So that's sort of that third component. Les, I'd be interested to hear, from a church rhythm perspective. You've worked with a lot of church planners, a lot of church leaders. When you think of this post-Easter season, what is this post-Easter season for a lot of the pastors? What's sort of that mentality and what are they thinking in this time usually?
I know a lot of my peers, they disappear. This is their vacation week. I don't work Monday, Tuesday. That kind of thing. And sadly, I think for some of them, it's just, what do I need? And they recover and they just jump back in and start running. There's a few, and I'm trying to be one of them. We've slowed the whole thing down. There's no big programs. There's no massive energy outflow right now. We've got the basic team just making this next Sunday happen. There are no huge programs during the week. Just a couple little Bible studies that'll meet. So that's kind of what I've observed and what I've experienced. And it's probably a question here, it's an observation and a question. There are a couple of Energizer bunnies. They just never slow down. They just never need the nap. Their vacations are, I built the cabin up in the woods. I repainted my mom's house. They make the rest of us look bad, feel bad. What do we do with them?
It's a great question. You want to start on that one?
No, I don't even know, because those people are like the opposite of me. I'm like, where's the extra nap? Like last week, I was tired enough. I was taking a morning nap and an afternoon nap just to keep going, So I'm not the Energizer bunny at all. And I see those people and I think, wow, what's going on? And you like, get off the drugs. I don't know what's going on. There's something unhealthy about that, right? There's not. It feels like that to me. I think it is a time though when some people. My son is with a church plant. This is the first year of the church, and one of the things they talked about is Easter, such a build up to Easter. We have new people come, and then that next week, maybe Easter was their first Sunday, and they decide to come back that next week, and the experience could be so drastically different. They're like, "What just happened? Like, were you just putting on a show for me last week, and this is real, or what's going on here? What's the real thing? Because now I don't know." And they're really trying to be intentional, not to let it drop too much, so that those who are coming, not that they have to keep this high energy, but that it doesn't feel like that was a show and this is just a drop off, to keep some kind of energy. And so I think they've kind of paced themselves a little bit at Easter, even thinking ahead to those next weeks, because I think there is this thing of what's to come. And I think it's always helpful to have something out there that you're looking forward to on the calendar. So whether it's, maybe there's baptisms coming in a little bit, or maybe Pentecost is a bigger thing and you're kind of building to the next thing, but something out there that is another, it's not right away, but it's something that is you're building into. Doesn't need the same kind of programming infrastructure, I don't think, but that you're looking forward to, because Easter is a different one, right? Like after Easter, we've got a couple of days. We got Mother's Day, Father's Day. We've got a Memorial Day weekend, whatever we might have. We don't have other big Christian days though for quite a while. So it does present, I think, an opportunity to look at what is it that we would like to build into the team. And I think that was this empowerment and growth. As we reflect, where is it that we say, hey, this is a time, this is a meaningful time where we can maybe take advantage of that. There's not a Christmas or a Thanksgiving or an Easter on the calendar for the next few months. How can we, in a way that doesn't add pressure, but really is kind of taking that moment to say, how can we build maybe into the team in these ways? Summer's coming, we're going to have a break, things are going to change up in the schedule there, but we've still got some time before then. What can we do in that way that is maybe taking on we did a lot together. How can we build relationally together? How can we, maybe it's not even that we're internally focused on each other, but how can we grow together, so that we're doing something where there's this element of we're growing together and modeling that. Yeah, I do think it is a unique time on our calendar. There's just other times that you don't have this really. We got Easter, and then we've just got an opportunity here that I don't think has to be high pressured, but it's a unique one during the year that we probably don't have it in other ways. And of course, school calendars are different everywhere in the world, I know. So, there's a lot of different dynamics, but it's a unique one, I think, that we can use to do some of that growth that maybe even after Christmas, you get a little bit of that before you hit the Easter time. But I think this is another one of those that, at least for us, fall is not that. Fall is heavy and hard. You're going 100 miles an hour and building pace towards Christmas. But coming in after Easter is a nice one to be thoughtful about.
Yeah, I hear that and affirm that less, sort of back to the Energizer Bunny idea in there. It's been interesting as I've seen some of those people. I think it's really affirming that is what they need, and so honoring that. The first time that I had someone that had, again, Birkman language, a super high physical energy score, when they explained to me how it hurt them when somebody wouldn't give them more to do, that somebody was trying to honor them by pulling something back from them, and they thought they had offended that person, that they had done something wrong. So as there are the Energizer bunnies, it's probably less about are you going to recharge? And it's more, hey, what are the projects that you're working on right now that seem most life-giving to you? What are the things that you're doing right now that really are meaningful to you? And if they say, man, I don't even know what to do right now. Well, it's amazing what all things we can do around the church, right? Where we can leverage some of that. But I think it's really just saying, it's honoring that fact that it doesn't have to be a slowdown for those people. It's what's the project that is meaningful to you right now? Or what is it that you've got going on? What do you love that you're doing right now? And it's leaning into that busyness. Whereas for me, that feels fatiguing. for them, it really is a recharge for them. But it's important to remember that idea, though, that busyness for them is their recharge, that it's just a different type of that. You know, I work a lot in medicine and with medical people, and a lot of them have sort of this outside, you know, energy that they have to expend, right? And so I've gone from making the assumption of, you know, hey, what are you binge watching or what are you reading right now, to, you know, tell me what you do. Well, you know, what's that weekend activity that for you seems to sort of reset yourself for the next week? You know, how do you do that well, so that then I can just ask better questions? I can honor that in a more intentional way, rather than making the assumption of, man, hope you got some downtime this past weekend. It probably may not be downtime for them. Maybe, you know, yeah, it was. I went and built the cabin, or I went and did whatever. So I think in a team, it helps to, you know, again, part of it is to put words to some of what we're seeing. Man, we recharge differently, and Sam, he's gonna go build his cabin, and man, that's gonna be fun for him. I'm gonna pick up a Grisham novel that I haven't read in a while and veg out. You know, what does that look like? But to just name it, that our recharge is different, I think sometimes can be helpful, both to those individuals and to the rest of the team as well.
I was interested in, Matt, when you were talking about the cycles in the church. You got the uptime, the downtime, and the show and stuff. One of the things I've adopted, and I started this while as a church planter, is creating low budget, low energy, fun things in between the high energy, hard things, like Hawaiian Church Sunday in the middle of the winter during that dead time. Ice cream socials and Christmas in July in the middle of that slow summer thing. And for us here at the church, we're going to do one May 5th, Cinco de Mayo. We're going to have bowls of chips and salsa in the lobby as people are leaving the sanctuary. And it's a chance just to mill about, not do. And so we're honoring, we're affirming, and we're giving space for people to do it their different way. I have a couple of people, I'll be in charge, you know, and then I've got other people who are like, can you hand me the chips? You know, so that's how I've been playing that with the cycles in the church. Because yeah, I feel guilty about the Sunday after Easter, the Sunday after Christmas, because it does look like a show if you don't know how we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah, those are great, I think, creative ways to keep it fresh and different for people, right? And it does give opportunities for other people to jump in and be involved, where for some people they want to step back, and other people are like, hey, man, give me the chance, I'd love to do that. And to let people jump in. We have some people that are probably a little too eager, and we need to focus them, right? But to give people the chance to be involved is so key, I think. You know, even on our teams, I've worked with a lot of teams, and there's teams that are, some people are in on everything, and other people are kind of on the edge, no matter how small that team is. And giving them opportunities to serve or to do things that are at their pace, that are at their love, just helps them feel connected. People who are not serving, certainly in our churches, right? But even on our ministry teams, people who are not doing something, and hopefully it fits them, they're going to feel less connected relationally, I think, even if they're not able to be involved in serving somehow together. So finding those ways to let people jump in and in ways that are fun and enjoyable too, I think is really key. Oh.
You know, I coach a lot of people who are preparing for retirement these days. We are located at a large Air Force base where a lot of people, this is their last assignment, and they're already talking about, after this, I'll be retiring. And my big question to them is, do you know what you're going to be retiring to? You know, not the big event of retiring is one thing, but what comes after that? Mm-hmm. And in a lot of ways, there's a corollary here. After you have the big event, do you already know what's coming after that? Do you have a plan for after that? Because if you don't, there's this great big letdown, and then it's so hard to get the energy cranked back up, to get the productive steam going again. And there's where I draw the corollary to say, do you know what's coming after Easter? What is going to be the emphasis? Or if there is no big event coming, then how are you and your team going to be taking advantage of this time to perhaps let the blue need people do some really serious reflecting? And what are the cleanup things, if we're in spring cleanup time, what are the cleanup things that those red people can just put their hands to and get going with it? Who are the people we need to be following up with that were here on Easter Sunday, and get those green people out visiting with them and talking to them if they've got those high green need and usuals. And for those yellow people to say, hey, help us reflect on how did we do? Are we on track here? Are there other things that we need to be looking at that we're not looking at? For everybody, there ought to be something that will be on the calendar right after the big event so that we don't lose our momentum.
Yeah. I think that's good. And I think it's us as leaders doing that with people, but I think it's also helping teams to do that with each other, to help each other, to encourage each other to know, not just that we would know them, or as a facilitator that I would know them, but really, how do they know each other, and how are we facilitating that growth that's going on there, so that it's not centered around us or a team leader making it happen, right? But it's actually a part of the way that we function. And I think there's always this element of growing and learning. I think that is such a key thing. It doesn't have to be a hard thing or a heavy thing, but that we're learning, right? We had a sit down with some leaders that we've known for years, and we just asked some questions that were kind of unusual questions, but they got a little bit below the surface. We learned so much about each other. We're like, how did we not know this, right? But we want to continue to learn about each other, because that is just an ongoing thing that we want to be involved in, because it spurs then that there is more to learn, and that I want to keep learning, and that I get to share from myself, that there's this. I think that is really important for us to continue to just foster among our teams. Now, we can facilitate it sometimes, but hopefully it goes beyond just when we're there leading the meeting or leading the time and the questions. That's just what we begin to do. Then we just realize there's depth there that I haven't yet mined, and I want to get to know people. And as we do, then what I find is that then the Lord begins to work, because I think the Lord is developing teams. He's developing his church, and hopefully that doesn't stop. We don't hit a plateau. And as he's developing it, then we get to see that actually there's some shifts. So there's some things, as a pastor of a smaller church, have been doing as he's developing his church and our team. My weaknesses are showing up a little bit more in some areas, as he is bringing up others who actually should be doing that, as other people ought to be doing certain things. And he's doing it in a way where the church is still being built. It's not that somehow we had to fall apart before we learned this. I think if we can embrace this thing, then we see the empowerment going on, that we not holding on, we're freely giving as we're learning about each other. And what a beautiful thing to watch God work in those ways as we continue to develop and watch him developing. I think it's him watching him work in us in those ways.
That is so true. And John, in the article, you mentioned some tools that we have that can help teams to get at some of that.
Yeah, I just think if we understand as leaders where we want to take our teams, or where we want to continue to foster some of that growth, then there are just opportunities out there, whether that be in the values. I think for a lot of us in GRIP-Birkman, if we've spent a lot of time in GRIP-Birkman, then the plus assessments actually are really nice add-ons to have a different conversation that we haven't had before. The values being one of those, to really lean into that conversation. Discerning direction. maybe there are a number of new people, or maybe because you have a little bit of a window. I mean, the discerning direction together is a process. It takes some time, takes some one-on-one conversations and then a group facilitated thing. This may be a great window to be able to go through that process together. And then I always think, there are just a lot of the Birkman Insights reports that we don't tap into a lot of times. And as GRIP-Birkman coaches, to look at some of those is kind of intriguing. I've been in a couple of places of late where we're using some that I hadn't used as much before. The learning style one has been an interesting one to pull out. There's even a leadership style one that gives some insights. So just some different insights reports that aren't part of that initial set that comes out that you have access to, that can be a nice added tool to look at, as well as then, of course, coming back around. And anytime you add a new person or take a person away, you got a new group. And so pulling out some of your team reports, even just from GRIP, saying, okay, let's look at who we are now and how this may play itself out for us in this coming season. So I think, and it doesn't have to be a 6-hour team build. It can be one of these things. Let's have a 10-minute conversation here. Let's have a 15-minute conversation, and really build on those. So I think the creativity and remembering the depth of what we have is pretty expansive at your fingertips. I'll be honest. I just went through the 6 working geniuses, Lencioni's thing. Really nice assessment. And I went back and I started thinking, is this truly unique? Is there nothing that I couldn't have found out if I would have just spent time in GRIP-Birkman? And I don't know. I don't think that there's trust me, I love Lencioni. I love his assessments. But as with most assessments, GRIP-Birkman is just so diverse and so complex. We may need to know what to pull out to get at some of those things, but the information is there. And so I just think it's an opportunity for us to continue to think about the unique uses that we have available to us in GRIP-Birkman.
And with that, we are at the top of the hour, believe it or not. I hope you've gotten some good ideas, some practical ideas. Go to the article if you want to review it at i2we.org, and you will see the article that's titled Post-Easter Practical Steps, with dashes between each of those words. Look for that article and get some good ideas about how to get the energy back up, keep it up after an event like Easter, to keep your team moving forward and building unity so that more people will know Jesus. With that, we say, so long, folks. We hope to see you again next month on our next GRIP-Birkman Coaches Cafe. Bye-bye now.